iconographer's prayer together as a way to center our minds. O Lord,
Bless my humble effort, and let my labor be for the salvation of my soul, and for the glory of your most holy name. Amen.
Back in 2005, which was a year before the centennial of our church, we decided to have a church-wide project and have as many people as possible work on an icon of the Transfiguration of Christ, which is the namesake of our church. And this event is one of the 12 feast days of the church. It's a very important event because this is when Jesus showed himself to be God. It is mentioned in all three synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And the words are similar, but they're a little bit different. So let me read the episode of the Transfiguration. About 8 days after Jesus said this, he took Peter, John, and James with him and went up onto a mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. 2 men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. They spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. Peter and his companions were very sleepy, but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men standing with him. As the men were leaving Jesus, Peter said to him, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what he was saying. While he was speaking, a cloud appeared and enveloped them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. A voice came from the cloud saying, "This is my son, whom I have chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, they found that Jesus was alone. The disciples kept this to themselves and told no one at that time what they had seen. This story is in all 3 of the synoptic gospels. All of the icons of the Transfiguration, and they go back as far as the mid-600s, have the same cast of characters. So up at the top, you will see Jesus in the middle, Moses on one side, Elijah on the other side. And they represent the law that Moses proclaimed and the prophets, and Elijah was a prophet. You'll see that they're all standing on mountains. Down at the bottom, you'll have 3 of Jesus's closest disciples, Peter, John, and you can tell it's John because he's a kid and he doesn't have a beard, and James. I used probably 6 or 7 different icons of the Transfiguration to come up with this design. And one of the things that I really liked, I liked the way that Moses and Elijah were leaning toward Jesus. I also like the fact, and you'll see this in other icons of the Transfiguration, that Peter was the one who said, he gestured up and said, "Let us build 3 shelters so that we can stay on this mountaintop forever." And John is peeking through his fingers because he was afraid. And James is tumbling down the mountain backwards. Oh, what is happening here? And in fact, and I have seen it, otherwise I would not have put it on this icon. His sandal is coming off his foot, and it's wrapped around with the leather thong. So it was exciting for me to work on this icon, and I was just telling Wes that I wasn't afraid, and that was good. I had no fear to do it. So let me tell you a little bit about how it was made. I think it's fascinating. Back in the day, just think about, you couldn't go to the store and buy paint. You had to use whatever was handy. And wood was handy, but if you paint on wood, it's going to soak in and it'll disappear and you won't have a picture. So they used what they had, and this, by the way, happens to be poplar that I bought at Lowe's. And then in order to keep the wood strong, they used linen. Now everything, this one I used cheesecloth because I was trying something new. This happens to be a piece of linen that came from a friend of mine who is a priest up in New Jersey, and this happened to be a piece of their fair linen. On this icon, I used an old fair linen, and some of you might remember Dorothy Washburn, who was head of the Altar Guild here since time immemorial. And she had, there was an old fair linen here at the church that she took and prepared it so that it could go on top of the wood. So underneath all of this is a piece of the fair linen from this church. And the fair linen, by the way, is that white cloth that goes on top of the altar. And the wood came from one of our parishioners who died, and he was a woodworker. He had shelves in his shop, and the shelves happened to be poplar, just because it's a popular board to use. And he stored his paint cans on it. And so those were the boards that we used. And you might remember Gary McCall. Gary McCall was also a woodworker, and he joined the boards together. Now, you don't usually see a board that's this wide. This is 16 inches. So it has to be joined together, and I didn't know this, but here's how he did it. Who's a woodworker in here?
Kurt.
Yeah. Okay, so to join 2 boards together like this, if you use glue, they're going to come apart. So what they do, they have what's called a biscuit. Do you know biscuits?
Mm-hmm.
Biscuits?
Biscuits, yes. I've used them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you carve a little slot here, you carve a little slot here and here, and then a biscuit is like a little disc of wood, and you put glue, and then you slip this in, and it joins the board together. So this board is joined with biscuits. And in some of the old icons, they'll crack right where they have been joined together. And that's just part of the life of the icon. I don't think it should be repaired. I think icons should have their path that they follow in life, and they look the way they look. So far, this has not cracked. And I don't expect it to. On top of that, oh, and another thing that Gary did was he put braces on the back. And the braces will also help the board not warp. It'll keep it stable. And on larger icons, that also is what was done way back in the day. They would put braces on the back of it. On top of the wood, and again with the linen holding it together to keep the board from coming apart, back in the day they would make what we call gesso. And it's not like the acrylic gesso that you buy in the art store now. You make your own. And it starts with some of the stickiest stuff that I have ever been exposed to, even more than super glue. And it's called rabbit skin glue. And these are little granules made from skins of rabbits. And they're little kernels that you mix with water, a certain amount of water, and then you sift in a certain amount of whiting, which is calcium carbonate, and marble dust. And these are both white powders. So if I took them out, they would be white, kind of like powdered sugar. But I thought you'd like to see the rabbit skin glue.
Do you have a recipe for how much of each you put in there?
Yes, there is a recipe that I follow. And then you cook it in a double boiler. And stir it and cook it. And then pour it into, I poured it into a Tupperware. And this is what it is. And it doesn't smell bad, but it's because I put some of that sore throat spray. So this is then kind of sliced off. I have other tools that I use, but this is the way it's done. So you slice off this white jello stuff, and then you scrape it on. And to prepare this board took about, well, I can't even remember how long, but it probably took about a month. And I always keep track of the number of layers that I put on, and I usually put it right on the back, right down here. I make little hash marks. This one has 18 layers of homemade gesso, and it's sanded in between the layers. And also, at the same time, even preparing the board is symbolic, and it's prayerful. So I almost always work in silence. Some people work to liturgical music, but I find that is distracting. So after a long period of time, then the board will look like this. And on this board, again, this is a smaller board, there are 11 coats of gesso. So I'll pass this around and you can feel how really smooth it is.
Did you sand that?
Yes, this has been sanded and then eventually wet sanded.
How long do you, when you put the coats on, how long do you wait? 24 hours?
No, you can work as soon as it's dry. So maybe in about an hour, you can do another coat and sand in between, put it on the edge. And now remember, underneath this is linen.
Yeah.
And that helps to hold the board together for centuries. We're talking centuries here.
How was the linen on there? How was the linen?
Oh, I dipped the linen in the liquid rabbit skin glue method, and I put it on the top, and it has bubbles, so I work the bubbles out. And you know, you have to work with it. It doesn't always go just right, but that's
You
part
cut
of
the
it.
excess often?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and you cut the extra off. So I'll pass this around and you can feel this. And what this represents symbolically, the wood always is used vertically and it represents the tree of life. And the gesso represents the uncreated light of God. The linen represents the shroud of Christ. So after the board was prepared, and this, everything I have is all packed up, so I was lucky to find this. This is a commercially prepared board that I got at an Icon workshop. And again, it's very smooth. After